Hey everyone, welcome to the final episode in the Finding Your First Bug series. We talked about all of the bugs, we talked about, IDORs and XSS and some other bugs. And now it's time to sort of go on, right? We found a bug, let's talk about impact and report writing. So this is a common question I get all the time. How do you know when you found a bug? Now that seems really simple, right? There's a bug. I found one. Done. But it's actually more complex than it sounds, because we know we found a bug when we have impact. Now, what is impact? Impact is our security effect. It has to have some kind of security effect on an organization. Even non-technical bugs like business logic errors can be really impactful, and technical ones not impactful at all. And this is really important, because just because you found this really cool bug and you found, you spent 3 hours writing scripts to fully exploit it, actually, if there's no security risk there, if you're not able to do something, you're not going to get paid for a bug. You're just going to be given an NA or maybe an informative, right? So it's really important to understand what impact is and when you've actually got impact. So how do you know if you've got impact? Now, you can start by asking yourself some questions. Does this affect an organization's data or intellectual property? If we're looking at RCEs, we're thinking we could delete all the data, we can copy all of the files, right? That's the kind of impact level we're looking at. Does this affect the users of a product? When we have something like an IDOR or an XSS, we're really saying we can create an impact to a user's account, or even sometimes an employee's account, right? Sometimes we're looking at kind of financial impact as well, which kind of sits between the two. That might be a case of, look, I can get something for free, or it might be, look, actually, if this all happens, then you can get, personal data about a user. We've got, is this likely to affect the reputation of an organization? If you can deface someone's website, you're really looking at impacting their reputation and the trust that their users have. And that's really some of the impact you're looking at. Would a malicious actor be interested in what you found? So the reason good hackers exist is to stop the bad ones, right? And if you've got something that you could give to a malicious actor and they'd be very interested, they'd be sending you little eye emojis, then you've got something that's got impact. And a lot of the time, and quite a lot of the job of bug bounty hunters, is actually to pretend to be the bad guys, right? We attack something and we think to ourselves, what possible impact can I get? How much damage can I do, and where am I going to do it? And with all of this, you should be able to link this back up to what the business does and what it is, and, being able to really put it in the organization's point of view. What does that actually mean? So if we find an IDOR, an e-commerce platform, and it allows you to cancel an order without being logged in. So very standard IDOR. To us, that's going to be just changing an ID from, 332 to 331. But what does that actually mean for the organization you're hacking? We can say, well, a malicious actor could go ahead and cancel everyone's orders without them knowing. Linking back to what the organization does, doesn't necessarily use the word IDOR, and really puts the finding you've got the bug IDOR into the context of impact. Now, we don't think of IDORs as being super impactful bugs. We think about our RCEs, we think about our SSRF, but actually an IDOR can be sometimes way more impactful than an RCE can be. If you get an RCE on a, sandbox server, right, then there's no impact there. It's sandbox, it's completely away from the world, there's no data on it, there's nothing that will impact the organization's security. If you find an IDOR that allows you to view someone else's records, maybe if we say something really severe, like maybe you could see someone's medication they're on if you know their name, right? Actually, that second IDOR is much more impactful than the RCE will ever be, because there's a lot of damage to the user there. It's personal information. And And, you know, why does impact matter anyway? So I've put an image here. The issue is really a plane crashed into someone's house. But actually the impact is the fact that the pilot died, there's a fire, the home was damaged, maybe people in the home, you know, they've lost part of their home. If that catches on fire even more, they're looking at a complete house fire, maybe the total loss of their home. Maybe people are stuck inside, we have more deaths. So really, we don't want to be reporting a plane crash, we're reporting the impact of that plane crash. And really, impact tells you found something interesting. Like, if you look at a bug and you're like, okay, what have I actually got here? If you can have a security impact, that means you found a bug. And it means you found something interesting. Impact is the kind of core idea you structure your report around. So you don't start a report by saying, I found an idle. You say, I found an ability for users to cancel other people's orders. Bug bounty platforms aren't there to throw money at you. They want to protect their customers, reputation, organization, and data from malicious hackers. As much as it's nice that they kind of act like ATM machines, actually what they need to know is this going to damage my organization? Or likely the organization I work for. So what are the benefits for really understanding impact? Well, for starters, reports get resolved quickly. If you can tell someone what the impact is, they can do a proper analysis, figure out, okay, this is the bug, this is how it happened, this is how it affected our users, here's how we can fix it, here's where it goes on our kind of to-do list of developer tasks, right? So they get resolved more quickly. Bounty amounts are higher. If you have an idle which allows someone to get every user's credit card info, that's a huge impact, big bounty. An RC on a sandbox system, no impact, no bounty. You know, if you get request smuggling is a great example. Sometimes with request smuggling you can get other people's passwords. Huge impact, right? But if you just get random junk requests, there's no impact there, right? And less NAs, less informatives. For you, that's good because on a place like HackerOne, the more you get, the higher your reputation is. And the better people can say, yeah, you're a good bug bounty hunter. But actually, when a program understands a bug better, they can also triage it better. If you report a bug and you get, you know, a triager telling you, oh, this impact isn't legitimate, this impact is an NA or an informative, actually, if you fully understand the impact of your bug, you can help them to fully understand the impact. And then you can make that case for a higher severity. Now, we kind of touched on this, and impact is mainly reported to programs using reports. Now we know about impact, let's talk about report writing. So, reports we have to send. Once you find a bug, you need to report it. And they kind of follow this basic structure. So first we have an asset and a severity. Bugcrowd uses P1 to P4. HackerOne will use high to low. You'll also get CVSS, which is another type of security score that gets a kind of number out of how exploitable it is. And then you kind of get this blank box, right? You get title, description. In Bugcrowd, you get title, proof of concept, and that's it. You just get this big old text box. But they should follow this basic structure. You should have a kind of summary, you know, what the bug is, what asset is vulnerable, why is it vulnerable. If we're looking at an idle, our summary might be users able to view other people's credit card info. And then our summary would be on the page blank, you are able to change the ID to any ID, thus causing users' credit card info to be reported back. And then you might go, which asset is vulnerable? It's this web page on this domain, and it's vulnerable because there's no if statement in there. Then you have your proof of concept and your steps to reproduce. So our proof of concept might be step 1, load up this page, step 2, change the ID, step 3, note that it is now showing you somebody else's credit card info. And then that's our proof of concept. Now, with more technical bugs, we might be looking at many steps to get something working. But actually for beginner bugs, you're probably only looking at a few steps. And that's good. You want your steps to be really clear, really easily understandable, very much a case of do this, then do this, then do this. Then we have why it matters, the impact that bug has. So we talked about impact before and how you know you found a bug. This is the time you have to really scare an organization, right? You want to sound like you're frightening them and this is the worst thing that's ever happened. Because for them, they need to know that. They want to know why this is bad. They want to know what the potential outcome is if a real attacker was to find this and exploit it. In addition, you can also add things like collaborators. So if you work with your friend to find a bug, you can add them. And maybe you decide, well, I've got a bug, but I can't figure out how to exploit it, and you ask someone for help. You might offer them, 20-80 split. You might offer them something 50-50 or 60-40. You can change that split there. And then you have additional documents like screenshots. A picture tells 1,000 words, which is really kind of cheesy. But it's true. If you can show a photo of how your bug is impacting something, it can be really helpful to understand it very, very quickly. Especially because, if you show one bug before one bug, the one, say, request returns before, one request returns after, you've actually got a really clear kind of link between that and your impact. So, something that's really important, we'll write a report, but actually programs get a lot of reports, and a lot of them aren't security issues. So Shopify engineering is probably one of the best examples of kind of this, because they produce these stats every month. So this is their February report. Of the closed reports, 35 were marked as informative, 62 were marked as not applicable, 19 duplicates, and 20 reports were marked as resolved. And they had a bit more activity, and they changed. You can see here they're talking about how they changed their bounties and changed to paying bounties on triage rather than paying on fix. So it's really important to make your report as easy to understand, because when a triager is dealing with 62 not applicable reports, they're not necessarily 100% looking for the really good ones. They're thinking, well, I know that out of everyone I have, I'm looking at, 39 reports that are legitimate and, nearly 100 that aren't. They've got a bias there, which is that your report is most likely to be marked as NA or informative, not as a legitimate bug. And especially as they do this very, very quickly, it's important to make your report as easy to understand for a triager who is limited in time as possible. And especially making that case for your bug, focusing on that business impact, making sure you fully explain the bug, providing those clear steps to reproduce, and including screenshots or other media to help explain details, videos, pictures, making sure you focus on that impact. So then they can look at your bug and go, yeah, you know what, I understand that impact. Because maybe of those 62 not applicable bugs, maybe there's a good amount there that have real bugs that just don't explain it properly and don't put it into their terms. So here's the other thing, triagers aren't your enemies. I see so much hate for triagers online. They're just doing their job. They really, really, really aren't there to stop you from getting bounties. They're not there to antagonize you. They're not there to make your life difficult. They're just trying to do their job. Often they're bounty hunters in their free time. They just have a full-time job. They're not there to stop you from getting bounties. They're not sitting there being like, how can I screw over this person now? They're just people trying to figure out the priority and validity of security issues. Now, I highly recommend this talk by Glenn from BSides Leeds 2019 called Confessions of a Bug Bounty Triager. And it's a really good insight onto the triage side of bug bounty hunting. And he mentions a lot about what he really likes in reports. Being concise, being very clear, not writing paragraphs of information, keeping it kind of very focused. And you just have to be nice to them. Like, a lot of people will say, HackerOne triagers are terrible and Why wasn't my bug triaged correctly? Well, actually, sometimes they do make mistakes, but you've got to make their job as easy as possible for them not to do that. So, what makes a good report? So, step 1, clear, concise writing. I know a lot of you aren't necessarily native English speakers, but try your best. Get a friend to give your writing a second look. Even if they're also not a native English speaker, maybe they'll spot something that you don't. You can use add-ons like Grammarly or Spellcheck, or put it into Word first, spell-check it there, and then put it into your bug bounty reports. And if you can write clearly and concisely, even if you haven't really got the grammar right, as long as you get the important information across, actually that can still make quite a good report. You don't have to be the native English speaker to produce a really good report. You just need to make sure that what you're writing is very clear. You have to explain a vulnerability on their terms. Now, quite a lot of the time, you just assume that I know security, so they must be security people. They might be security people, but they're on the defense side. They're not necessarily on the attack side. And being able to put it into their terms, being able to talk about how it affects users, talking about their assets, talking about how their assets might work under the hood. If you know that they're using Elasticsearch, for example, which is a type of searching for big data, if you know they're using that, mention that. Really talk to them and explain it on their own terms. Come meet them halfway, Don't just write it as an attacker, write it as if you were trying to get a point across to a defender. And this is really a skill. This takes time to develop, especially to put essentially your mind in somebody else's shoes and really understanding how they feel. But you get better over time, so just try your best. Number 3, a clear POC, a clear steps to exploit. If you're having to make them follow 30 different steps, but 3 of them can be done in the same request, that'll make your report really long, and it'll also make it very confusing. Providing something like a one-click exploit is a huge bonus, especially when you're dealing with really complex vulnerabilities like request smuggling. They might just want to take your turbo intruder, for example, script. And really making that POC very clear, very understandable, is such a huge help for triagers. And the 4th one is be polite to triagers. Being rude and yelling at them won't help your bug be triaged faster. In fact, you'll probably get the other response. You'll just get people who don't want to deal with you. If you're not professional and constantly harass them, they're not going to want to help you. And they're just going to want to get rid of you as soon as possible. And it doesn't include giving you a bounty, because they can just ban you from a program and don't have to pay out. So really being polite, being professional to triagers. I mentioned, this video, Confessions of a Bug Bounty Triager. That's a really great way to understand what the other side is going through. 5 is don't make assumptions. Don't assume your triager knows everything about an asset or what it does, right? Because they're a security person, usually. They're not necessarily on the development team. So you can mention things like, oh, I see you're using framework X, but be very clear that that's a framework in use. Don't assume they know what framework are being used on the developer side. But also on the other side, don't assume they know every bug in existence. They might be developers instead of security people. So then you're dealing with the opposite problem. So it's really useful to give, maybe some background info, especially for more technical bugs, and really explain them through what you've got. So those are kind of 5 big things. So let's look at some bad reports and see what these people are doing wrong. And these ones are really well known, but we'll see some reports that have some issues and some reports that are a lot better. So let's look at bad code. So, hi sir, my name is Ahmed Kohli, and I'm the biggest hacker on Egypt. I'm also who hacked ISIS pages with my friend Ahmed Samara, and we are so dangerous, so don't trust me, please. Anyway, I found that your code here is starting with PHP, and it should be with ? End bracket. any hacker like me can run HTML code on this page, so you should close the source by closing the PHP tag. Reference about me. Reference about my friend Ahmed. Reference about on this bug and how to fix it. Please donate my reward to this charity company. Thanks for reading my report well. So, at the very start here, I'm just going to go get my little pen. At the very start here, we have references, not about the bug, but about them. And we also have here, we have information about them. Now, nobody cares who you are at all. All this part of the report is basically like static because we don't care. What we care is about the security risk of what we've got. And he also mentions, please donate my reward to this charity. And you know what we're missing here? The impact. We've got any hacker like me can run HTML code on this page, but actually that's not putting that in the business line. Now, in fact, there is no security risk here. This is actually quite well known in PHP, as you don't actually have to end with this tag. Here, you don't have to end with it. You can start with it and then just have this part. So he doesn't really understand the bug. He hasn't really made them understand how it affects their users, because it doesn't. And most of it is about himself. So this report is not starting out well. So then he harasses them by saying, no reports, it's been 15 minutes. It can take months for a bug to be resolved, because especially for a low risk vulnerability, it's on the development pipeline, but developers, it takes time for them to do things. So it's been 15 minutes without a update. The program replies, rolls D20 for diplomacy and attempt to reply with tact. Rolls a 1. So the program has decided to not really reply professionally. This is a very silly and total waste of both of our time, but let's cast aside common sense and good taste for a moment at the risk of having publicly humoured a Markov bot. So Markov chains are a type of predictive statistical model that represents kind of how one state changes to another. So it's commonly used for like your predictive text. It will tell you the likelihood that, say, the is then followed by cat is then followed by Matt is then followed by whatever, right? Onwards. So then he explains kind of here where it's not a big impact. So it's a non-essential command line utility. So what the hacker has really failed to understand here is what the asset does. Then we've got number 2, any hacker can run, like me, can run HTML code. And again, he doesn't understand the asset. It's not a web page, it's command line utility. He doesn't understand the bug because he's asking, well, what does it mean? And what do you mean by closed source? So then we have this kind of, any updates, please fix it. And then we've got 3 things happened here. Your account was hacked by someone looking to trash your reputation. 2, you have no idea what you're doing. And 3, you're a bot. I'm closing this invalid and publishing via full disclosure. So then we get some kind of back and forth here. And this happens a lot, actually, when we deal with kind of security triagers. We actually often have this back and forth relationship as we kind of understand what happened, and they try and understand what happened, and we kind of come to this kind of shared idea of what is the security risk is. So he replies back saying, should I have reported it on GitHub? And because he didn't get a reply quick enough, he then spams them with just a single dot. Now, when you reply to a message on HackerOne, actually what you do is you send an email to the security team and you send them another notification. And this is all on the same day as well. So this person is just unhappy that he's had to wait more than a few minutes for a response. And again, he says, your entire point here is that you believe PHP scripts must end in a ending tag. but actually it doesn't have to. It should be omitted as per PSR4. So he's then spent the time here to understand there's no vulnerability on this code, but actually then he then starts to be rude to the triager. Okay, as you like. We have no place here. No place there, pro. Let us go away from here and let us hack ISIS. And then it says, I give up.jpg. And he goes, can I republish the report? It's already been published. And then he says, can you please give me $50 and I will go out from here? These are terrible ways to deal with a triager. Like saying, we have no place, we're pros, you don't know what you're doing. And then just asking for a bounty to go away. There's a lot of mistakes made here. And, this is very famous as being a very terrible case, but actually we'll see this kind of attitude, as we go on, especially being kind of antagonistic towards triagers. So here's an example of someone who's being very antagonistic towards triagers. We've got xss at pages.et.uber.com. So actually, this is not a terrible first report, because we've got the vulnerable domain, the link with the payload used, and then we've got some screenshots. That's actually really good to break down how you found a bug. Now, unfortunately, this person hasn't read the programs because et.uber.com is out of scope. Now, this can sometimes happen. Sometimes you don't necessarily read it correctly and you just miss out. It's really important to go and have a look at, the burp at the very bottom of every page, the target page. There's like download burp configuration file that can really help you from going out of scope. So we've got the vulnerable domain here, but what we're missing, there's no impact. He doesn't understand what et.uber.com does to really know what the impact is. He hasn't written something that says, this is the impact of an XSS, this is why you should care about my bug. So they close it as being out of scope, and then he then says, respected, it is a request. Once you patch this vulnerability, do not disclose the report. And then someone from Uber says, closing is not applicable as this is out of scope. So this is normal. You'll have maybe one person close the report here, but actually somebody else might change it over here just because they want to organize their own reports. And then we have the next person who goes along and says, you fucking asshole motherfucker, I know this is out of scope and your team member marked as informative and closed the report still. Still, I don't argue about it and accepted it, fucker. I respectfully ask you to disclose my report and you moron motherfucker deducted my reputation point. Bloody motherfucker taxi driver. Now, here's the thing. This is really not okay. You shouldn't abuse anybody, but you especially shouldn't abuse people who are just trying to do their job. Can you imagine going and buying food from, a fast food place, and your food was late and you decided to yell at them and call them names? It's just not okay. And especially bug bounty hunters should be a professional environment. We're professional security people. Yes, we do it for fun, but actually we're protecting some of the world's biggest companies. We need to act like it. So actually, then the person at Uber is quite nice to him back. Very professional. So first off, I want to apologise for not writing a longer response when I updated the report state. That's my fault. However, as you acknowledged yourself, this is not in scope per our program policy. Now, this is very professional of them. They're very clear saying, it's my fault, I didn't explain it properly. And again, we've got this part here, we've got explaining why it's out of scope, specifically for their statistics and their own metrics. So, maybe Bug Triage Rob was just wrong in marking it as informative before. And again, they warn them. They say, don't abuse our triagers, you will be GAT banned. So then they reply back saying, first, I am not going to apologise for my behaviour in this scenario. I am right. The problem here is the report was already closed and marked as informative. After that, you open it, deducted my reputation point and marked closed it with status not applicable. Why you did it? Maybe so for some personal gain? I need to know why you did so, and I don't give me the excuse of out of scope. I know out of scope from last 14 days when it was marked as informative. You deducted my 5 reputation points, I want them back. Third, you have read the previous message where you think I am just saying that I will disclose your bug. In fact, I was respectively asking so. And then they obviously banned this person because he had obviously already started to insult them. And actually, they ask here, why did you remove my reputation points? But actually, they very clearly explained why. And then here we've got, the program use of abusive language was banned, and then it was marked as NA and has also been resolved. And this has been publicly disclosed. They then say, now you already ruined the report by making me angry, and now you make me abuse you? And HackerOne banned them. So this is a good example to explain why you shouldn't abuse triagers. They really are just doing their job, and when they do something like this, they're actually doing it for their business reasons, not doing it to take away people's bounties or take away people's reputation points. They're doing it for their internal trackers so they can keep track of all the bugs they've got. Right, so now we're on H1514. So this was a bit of a drama which has already happened a while ago. But again, it's about abusing triagers, abusing HackerOne staff, really spamming people. And here we have probably a legitimate bug. We don't see the initial report, but actually looking at that, you've got a stored XSS via CSRF. So probably quite a good bug. It got the severity is a medium. And we get, thank you for your submission. The team is going to validate it. This is quite normal to get. A lot of the time you'll get triagers who will say, this looks good, but actually someone from the team needs to confirm it. And then Kianan says, why don't you triage? A triager has no communication with us. Even he didn't triage the report, although he said he has evaluated report to team. Is this how triage works? I don't think so. HackerOne support and mediation requests are really ridiculous and annoying, and still, you really suck. Nobody likes you in the community. I'm sorry for that still. I'm really pissed off, and if I can't get any reply, I hope you understand. Why I reported this, every site is using the same CMS, but the exploitation of this XSS was way different from others, whatever. And here we've got, this is maybe not as abusive as telling someone to go fuck themselves, but actually telling someone they suck because they're doing their job is really not very polite. And nobody is going to want to deal with somebody who's being really rude to members of staff, especially as he probably knows HackerOne staff because he's a big deal in the community. So actually, he might be abusing one of his friends. Do you really think that the people who run this program are going to be like, oh yeah, we want him to hack us? And again, we have the kind of endpoint of this. The team issued this they will not be accepting it as such. Please self-close this report to preserve your reputation points. And here, they then say, there's a smiley face, but actually, this is quite antagonistic to say. Just being nice to people, and especially to triagers, being respectful of them is going to get you a long way. Maybe not telling them that you suck. So these are some really bad reports. Let's have a look at some medium reports. They were a little bit extreme. So total bounty paid can be disclosed. Here we have an issue where one of the main problems of why this was, confusingly dealt with over here is that it was quite, for them, they didn't quite understand, because if you look at the next slide, they then say it was informative and it was working as intended, but actually because they didn't fully explain the bug properly here, they didn't really understand what had been found. So we have kind of this this part here, and we have an image, which helps a lot. And then we've got the one we're interested in, bounty sent in the last 30 days. This new feature could potentially disclose some program information that the team isn't willing to share. Indeed, it can happen in this scenario. So it can show this, but actually they might not want it to be visible. So we then have the kind of back and forth we tend to have. Hi, thanks for your submission. Hi, this is a dupe. And then we have this one here. And this is really a bit much, is constantly asking for updates. Especially when you copy the same one again and again and again, it's just, for them, they're just not going to want to listen to that, right? But you know what? Actually, we then get a reply back saying, this is working as intended. And then this is really friendly. This is a great update. You know, very friendly, very open. Then we have, I feel like this report is the same as this report and it wasn't triaged accordingly. Can you please take a look and tell me what happened here? Now, they ask them very politely, they're very nice, they're not demanding anything, they're just saying, look, can you please take a look? And then, you know what, they come back and say, you know what, it is a bug, and here's $500. And then he asks to disclose it. So really, the problem that the kind of medium part of this report is that he didn't explain it properly to start with, which led to a really confusing mix of if it's vulnerable, if it's not vulnerable. And that really, for him, made it quite difficult for them to understand what the impact was. So really writing very clearly, really understanding the kind of asset and use case and explain them back can give you that bounty that they got, 16 days ago, 7 months ago when they first announced the feature. So let's have a look at another one. We're not going to do too many of these because there's a lot of good ones that we could look at. So email address of any user can be queried on Report Invitation GraphQL type when username is known. And although this paid out and this got a bounty, we're still dealing with this kind of quite confusing report where there's not really written in full English. Email ID of all HackerOne users disclosure. There is a flaw. With that, I can get all HackerOne users' email ID. And then the steps to reproduce here are actually pretty clear. They are stuff people could follow. But because of there's no impact PII disclosed, what does that mean? What information is disclosed, right? We need to flesh this out a little bit more. And again, we get the back and forth. And the triagers here and the staff are actually really friendly. And they're really yeah, it's fine, it's good. And actually they got $7,000 for it. So being able to go from kind of this, maybe they would have got it triaged a little bit faster if they had fully explained it, but actually this was very quick for a kind of medium report. Another one where we have very clear description here, very clear POC. Impact is pretty good, but actually it just needs to be fleshed out a little bit more. It just needs to really, this one is great, create a command, but what does that mean? Using what you know about this one's jump cloud, what can you do? Create a command, well, what kind of commands are there? And again, take over, add or remove users, this is great. One thing that would be here would be maybe just fleshing it out, explaining what jump cloud is. But this was triaged very quickly. The staff looked at it, but he's spamming the reports here, and then still replies back saying, "You will only receive updates when there are updates," and you just can't expect updates constantly, especially on. We've got October 18th, then October 21st, so 3 days later, then 3 days later again. Development time just doesn't happen that quickly. Stuff can't get fixed super fast. and then it was October 28th he got a reply. So that's like 10 days. It's really quick, actually. But, you know, spamming people constantly when they're dealing with a critical report is actually quite difficult. And there's a different way to just be polite about it. Like, this first one seemed very, very polite here. But then this one is maybe less polite. So, let's see some really good reports. This is by Space Raccoon. So, unreleased CTF levels are revealed at a certain endpoint. So, here we have a good description of what it is. We have very clear, very concise. There are 2 CTF levels that have not been revealed. However, there's an IDOR and you can see them. Very simple. But it's not an IDOR where they're describing kind of, oh, the IDOR exists. It's like the IDOR reveals them. Steps to reproduce, very, very simple. Create a group, go to the index page, whatever. He includes some screenshots here. And you know what? This impact is really good. Because they don't just say it's been revealed. They say, well, actually, if they know what the upcoming levels are and there are prizes to the first to complete them, you can actually try and get ahead of others, especially if there are prizes. And then he adds some additional info here in other comments, just to really flesh out. He maybe looked at it and decided, actually, I wanted to add some more information here and make it clearer. And because it was so clear, the triage thing happened very quickly. They validate the report on the same day that it was reported. Then it was fixed kind of about, what is that, 11 days afterwards, so really quick fix as well. Now, this is what we want from a really good report. We want them to be able to triage it super quickly, to pay out the bounty really quickly because they understand what the risk is, and then to fix it really quickly. And having a good, understandable report really helps to do that. So again, this is the request smuggling report. I'm not going to go super in-depth here, but actually this is a really technical report and it's worth mentioning this. So here he fully explains, you know, what the kind of services they're using are. We've got Golang, we've got proxy. He understands what the background of this vulnerability is. And then this explains it. And then he's going by saying ambiguous requests, and that attacker could desynchronize these servers. So again, really focusing on kind of the impact. And then a little bit of an explanation. And then this whole thing here where he's got all of the code he sends them. And going on and on and on. And then he writes an impact statement here. And it focuses on kind of what you can do with it. Imports to a malicious domain, attacker can inject a keylogger. And then again, he shows more impact by, as well as getting a stored XSS, it can be used to hijack the browser. Here are some more versions of this. So even though it's kind of technical, it's really difficult. And in fact, the triager and the person dealing with this doesn't actually understand why it's happening. And they have this kind of back and forth kind of discussion here in these ones, which is then saying, you know, I don't understand why this works. I don't understand how the resolution will work. And they work together. And this is really good, especially for dealing with a complex technical one, being able to sit down and explain it to them and really understand what happened is a huge help. And, you know, even though it's super technical, he understands their infrastructure, he understands what they do, he understands what the potential impact is, and that really helps. This is a great report, by the way. If you're interested in request smuggling, I highly recommend reading this because it's very interesting about how this was resolved. And finally, we've got this report from H1514 Deanonymizing Exchange Marketplace private listings. And I really like this report because look at this, right? He explains the asset. It allows shop holders to sell their business in an easy way. When placing the shop in the listings, the owner has the option to place their store as a private listing where only stats will be displayed. So really showing that he understands what it does. Then again, we have not just private information is being disclosed, but actually what private information is being disclosed. And here we have the steps to reproduce, and these were presumably photos here that have been removed as it's been disclosed. And again, you see some really clear kind of steps to reproduce and really an understanding of what happens. We've got, you know, search for this DOM element. We've got do some recon to figure out what a key does. We've got you know, we've really got an understanding of what it does. And here we have an attacker can de-anonymize private listings in the marketplace, finding out who a shop owner is and what the business what is the business. So really focusing on what Shopify want to know, really focusing on their users, they're focusing on their kind of understanding. So that's it for some really good reports and looking at them. But let's talk about some further reading. I don't usually do this, but I really want to highlight these videos because I think they're really important. And there's a Twitter thread as well. So I talked about this in my earlier slides. Confession of a Bug Bounty Triager by Glenn. Really, really interesting. If you want to know what being a triager is like and what it's like to be on the other end, this is so good to listen to. Really, really useful. We've got how to make a good bug submission by Bugcrowd University. Again, really good video on creating submissions, right? So not just how Bugcrowd likes to do it, especially if you want to do Bugcrowd instead. So not just kind of here's how you write a submission, you fill in a text box, but really explaining what makes it good. Naffy got asked at Nullcon how to write good bug bounty reports, what should they do? And there was a ton of really good responses here. You know, we've got things like business impact, grammar, but some other things like one-click POCs, explaining what assets you're targeting. This is really good. And Donut just quote tweeted this. So I hope you found that video useful. I hope that you all have found this whole series quite useful. This is kind of the bookend, if you like, of we started out with business logic errors and types of bugs, and we went into goal setting and motivation, and now we're kind of at the end of the stage, which is impact and report writing. It's the last part. Once you do that, the bug is in. You just have to wait. So I hope you found this really interesting. I hope this has really helped. I hope this whole series has helped. And I hope you will stay around for some of the other series I'm going to run, especially as we start talking about more advanced bugs. You know, talking not just about XSS, but blind XSS, DOM-based XSS. Looking at how to chain bugs together. And, you know, not just stopping when you've got one bug, but actually going, okay, what about the next bug I can get? Looking at, you know, complex vulnerabilities, request smuggling, RCEs, SSRF, those kinds of things as well. So I hope you find this really interesting. I hope that this video has been super useful, and I will see you all in the next video. Thank you very much for watching.